if anybody's seen any of my panels before or hasn't, my name is Kevin Derendorf. I tend to throw a lot of stuff in panels, so I go very quickly, so that's why I'm going to get started on the ASAP. So this is a panel on Jaws and Sharksploitation in Japan. And happy Shark Week, everybody.
Yes.
So what kind of inspired this was I was watching this movie last year called Godzilla -1, and I thought it was pretty good. And the best sequence in the movie I thought was the sequence where Godzilla's chasing the boat and they're throwing these exploding things in his mouth that blow up to kill him. And I thought, wow, that's really similar to this scene in this movie called Jaws from 1975. I wonder if maybe the creator of Godzilla -1 is familiar with that. Well, he's in fact a big fan of director Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws. He in fact called him like a living god. And sure enough, in an interview, he says, quote, "There's definitely influence from Spielberg and Jaws." So that seems pretty cut and dry there. So but that's one Godzilla movie. It's not like the other Godzilla movies where we see this kind of like. Well, I mean, I guess the main character in Godzilla 2014 is named Brody as a reference to Brody from Jaws. And Gareth Edwards did say that the fact that he keeps cutting away from Godzilla in that movie is because of the way in Jaws you can't really see the monster through most of it, and it's kind of building up the tension. And Godzilla even swings with his organs out in that movie to be kind of like a shark. And then you look at more of the MonsterVerse movies. In the recent series Monarch, there's a great chase sequence, which is again very similar to that chase sequence in Jaws. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, there's this device called the Orca, which is named after the boat in Jaws. And then in Godzilla 1998, you have this dock sequence where fishermen basically want to destroy the entire dock trying to catch the monster, and that's also like a scene in Jaws. So we've got some influence from the Jaws in this Godzilla stuff, but maybe some of the other shark movies out there. In Gojiban or Godziban, which is a fantastic Godzilla puppet series on YouTube if you haven't checked it out, there is a giant shark monster, and in fact, at one point he gets sucked in a water spout and they're riffing on Sharknado. So we're seeing all of these influences here, and you think, wait a second, are all of these shark things kaiju movies? Sure enough, a lot of them do get marketed as such in Japan. As you can see in the kanji on Megalodon there, it's got the kanji for kaiju front and center. And similarly, you got Jaws facing off with Gorgo in this Japanese children's book. So I thought that this was kind of an interesting topic, so I think today we're just going to talk a little bit about the history of sharks as monsters in Japan, the influence of Jaws, the influence of the Asylum, which has really been cranking out a whole lot of shark movies in modern days, and kind of what sort of tokusatsu and international kind of kaiju stuff has been displaying it. And I will give a couple of cautions here. First of all, if you have a phobia of sharks, this is not a good panel. Secondly, if you want to learn about sharks, the actual biological organisms, there's a great aquarium you can go to in Chicago. You will learn nothing of scientific value here. This is where you go to see, Sharky Chan dabbing. So, before 1975, believe it or not, sharks weren't the default ocean monster. If you think about the sea monster, nowadays we're always going to think about sharks because it's just so permeated in the pop culture, but that's really because of Jaws. If you go back further, you'll see a lot more giant octopuses or giant whales in both American and Japanese cinema. In fact, the original concept for Godzilla from 1952 that Agent Tsuburaya wanted to do was a giant octopus. So some people would say, oh, there were no shark monsters before 1975, and I would disagree with that because there actually were a few in Japan, and Japan is an ocean-based country, so that makes sense. They spend a lot of time in the sea. They're going to have a lot of interaction with ocean life of all scales. So the first that I would kind of want to bring up here is the Yamaton from Ultraman, and he's a combination of a shark and the battleship Yamato. This was a concept for the original Ultraman series that never got used in the TV show, but got used in the manga by Daikaiju-fanboy. So didn't quite make it into the show, but coming kind of close. And then similarly to that, you have Shiranui in Dororo, which was a manga by Osamu Tezuka that came out in 1969. This is a guy who has two giant demon sharks that he uses to attack fisher boats. And unfortunately, the 1969 anime adaptation of Dororo didn't include this character, but he was included in the 2019 adaptation. So that show is excellent, and you can finally see the whole story adapted that way. Speaking of Osamu Tezuka, the god of manga in Japan, the creator of Astro Boy, and Blackjack, and Kimbo the White Lion, etc., he also did a series called Triton of the Sea. And in this, there are two different shark-based monsters. The first is Iboriro in the manga only. He's not in the anime. But I love this character's concept because he's this kind of demon guy who has wild hair that flows around, and his hair turns into a giant shark, which is many crazy shark movies as we see in the modern day. I've never seen one where somebody's hair turns into a shark. So I think kudos to Tezuka for being cutting edge. So Iboriro didn't make it into the anime, but there was a villain called Polypemos in the anime, who's just this kind of shark man who rides around on a giant anglerfish, which I think was fantastic. This is kind of like a Japanese version of Aquaman, so it's all aquatic themed villains. Then continuing on the anime world, we have Mazinger vs. Dark General, which is a movie from 1974. So right before Jaws comes out, there's a giant shark robot that flies. But I think when we're talking about shark monsters in Japan pre-Jaws, the one that's immediately going to come to everybody's mind is Zebra. This is from 1971. So this is the last of the real Showa Gamera movies. There was Super Monster that came out several years afterwards. There was compiled stock footage made by a different studio. But this is kind of the end of the Gamera cycle. Gamera has a lot of aquatic themed monsters because Gamera's a turtle, so of course he's going to fight a giant squid or a giant sea lizard or a giant, in this case, goblinfish. So a goblin shark, that's the one that's in the middle there. That's the basis for Zebra's design. So you might look at Zebra and think, oh, that's not a shark, but that's actually what they were basing it on. So I do think it's interesting. Gamera vs. Zebra is kind of a Hail Mary to save the franchise. It was actually a collaboration with SeaWorld, the theme park that had recently opened in Japan. So the whole movie is set at SeaWorld. And funnily enough, there was a Jaws sequel, Jaws 3D in 1983, that also used SeaWorld as their setting. So I just thought that was some great synergy between these two franchises as they were getting into their later sequels there. But, we've covered stuff beforehand. We're talking about Jaws already, so I think it's time we discuss, in 1975, in the words of the great band Lemon Demon, Jaws is here, here is Jaws. So this is based on a novel from 1974, which was loosely based on real shark attacks that happened in New Jersey. And this was kind of the thing that put Steven Spielberg on the map. It's the thing that created the whole genre of summer blockbusters. This was a July release. That's why we still have things like Shark Week in July this day. And it was the most successful movie in the world. It really kind of broke the mold for how movies got made. And it was the most successful movie in the world until Star Wars a couple years later. But in Japan, it was the most successful movie until E.T., like the better part of a decade later. It was dubbed into Japanese at least 4 different times, so it just kept coming around and around and around. And what I think is really fascinating about Jaws is Steven Spielberg was inspired by the likes of King Kong and Godzilla, monster movies, Creature on the Loose films, and he described it himself as a, quote, Japanese Saturday matinee horror flick. So there's really a lot of similarity, a lot of cross-pollination between our Godzilla and Kaiju stuff and these shark movies. So much like all over the world, Jaws had a big theatrical release in Japan. They were doing all sorts of theater exclusives. They had plushies and toys and posters. big displays. They even had like an aquarium where they had live sharks that people could pet, presumably not really huge ones. So Japan goes really hardcore on the promotional stuff. And basically, on top of the stuff that we normally get in the US, they were also doing some stuff in the world of manga. So Jaws had a manga adaptation in Shonen Champion. Shonen Champion had a series called Gekiga Roadshow, where each month they would adapt a different movie into manga format. And Jaws had a great little short story adaptation that kind of covers the entire story. It is very abbreviated because it's a short, one chapter for magazine circulation. But that was popular, so in fact there was later another adaptation of Jaws, this time for Herald Books, and this is a complete one-volume book series, so it's very long, but it's also going for a very adult market, and it's incredibly, incredibly violent. So this is often called the Gekiga version of Jaws. So manga is like the kid-friendly version. Gekiga is like the hardcore, like gruesome, like this is for grown-ups, not your kid stuff kind of material.
There we go, Sharksploitation.
So of course, being Japan, they love toys. As you might have noticed, if we've been in the dealer's room. There was all sorts of merchandising also attached to Jaws when that movie came out. And just about anything that you can imagine, but some of the things that I think are kind of the most of interest, there are gashapon, like the high-grade figures that you buy in a capsule machine. There are several of those covering the entire franchise. I love in the middle here, this is one of the first Jaws toys ever made, and it's great because it's a sticker, but it's a just a shark figure, but it has a sticker on it that says Jaws, like so in case you're confused. This is the same thing that if you had like the jumbo machiners, they would have the stickers on them that said Great Massacre. Like if you watch the show, Great Massacre doesn't have a label that says Great Massacre across his chest, but it's just, I guess, for the benefit of the children. We've also got a racer figure that was part of the Universal Monsters set of Pesci. We have an Android in them. One of my favorite things is actually Jaws bath bombs. So these are, they're shaped like a boat, the orca, and you throw it into the tub, and as the boat dissolves, you have a little shark figure in the middle, and then you find out which shark figure you got as the bath bomb dissolves. There's also Jaws the Ride. So in Universal Studios in Florida and in Los Angeles, there was a Jaws ride for many, many years, and they have since gone defunct because, in the words of Trey Parker, it was getting old and stupid. But Japan is really happy with that, so they continue to this day to have the Jaws ride. And of all of the Universal attractions, this is the one in Osaka is the only Universal Studios that still has a functioning Jaws ride. So if you want to go and check out the Jaws ride, you can go check it out there. And also being Japan, they've really leaned into it. So you can get all sorts of cute Jaws plushies and Jaws themed food at Universal Studios. So if you want the Jaws dog, I would recommend it. It's a great time. Japan has also had multiple video game adaptations made for Jaws in 1987, and then later with Pachinko, which is kind of like a sort of like a slot machine, kind of like a pinball kind of game. They have a whole series of these starting from 2006. And also in the movie Jaws itself, you can see a Japanese game made by Sega called Killer Shark, which is actually kind of funny because that game was mostly made as a Killer Manta game, and they reskinned it as Killer Shark, and that was the one, of course, that they decided to put in the movie Jaws for kind of an in-joke. So, as I said before, Jaws was incredibly popular, and as a result, everybody in the world decided, hey, we need to get on this and start making our own Jaws knockoffs. And this is kind of the beginning of what we think of as a lot of the popular blockbusters, where you have a lot from, like Italy and South America and other companies in the US. Everybody wanted to have their own version of Jaws. Some of them were directly shark knockoffs, some of them were, well, let's do an alligator or piranhas, or et cetera, and you had a whole lot of different kind of creature films directly following Jaws that were kind of exploiting on it. And I think I want to talk about 3 of these in particular, just as a quick little aside, because the author of Jaws, his kind of follow-up was a book called The Deep, which was then adapted into another aquatic horror type of thriller movie. We had Orca, which is a Jaws knockoff about a giant killer whale, and we had Tentacles, which was about a giant squid. And by the way, the art on the Japanese release of Tentacles was done by Noriyoshi Orai, who also did the Heisei Godzilla art. So if you see like the Violent or Destroya covers that look painted and immaculate, it's the same artist that did that for Japan. But I wanted to just call these out because all 3 of these also got adapted into manga for Gekiga Roadshow. And unfortunately, nobody's ever done a proper collection of all of these, so the best way to read these is to look up old decaying manga magazines from the 1970s and hope you can find one of them. But there's some really wild stuff in terms of these adaptations, and I just think that it's fantastic to highlight each one of them. So that's kind of the Western side of the Jaws influence in Japan. But then, because the movie was quite popular in Japan, you start to see a whole lot of different people on the Japanese studio side really deciding to kind of riff on it and cash in on it. And they didn't go quite the same way that other places in the world did. We didn't get another giant shark movie in Japan following Jaws immediately. But what we did get is some kind of very similar things playing on the same sort of themes. So one of the first ones that came out is, the year after Jaws, we got a Grandizer Metarobo Great Massacre movie that's a crossover with a giant sea kaiju. So these 3 giant robot characters from TV, anime, all team up, and the way that they have to defeat this giant monster that's so much huger than they are is to throw these gas canisters into the thing's mouth and then ignite it so it blows up. So this is exactly the same as the ending of Jaws. Similarly, we then got a movie called The Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. This is a movie about a plesiosaur, and then there's a flying kind of pteranodon that shows up at the very end. But mostly it's about the plesiosaur kind of stalking campers at a lake who are there for a big celebration, and they don't want to cancel the celebration because of funding kind of stuff. So it's very similar to what's going on with Jaws. This is a fun movie. It's got a great soundtrack, and it is. I still maintain this inspired the opening to GMK because it has a great sequence where somebody is going into the ice caves in the suicide forest and falls into a cave below and finds a dinosaur egg, and that's exactly the same with Yukishiro Hotaro's character in GMK. But in terms of Jaws stuff, I think it's you see a lot of similar shots and kind of vibes with it when the creature is stalking people out on a boat and then finding bodies and so on and so forth. It's a bit gory, so even though it has a VHS release that said just for kids, don't watch it for kids. Then after that, we had an international co-production called The Bermuda Depths that was made by Rankin Bass and some people who were from Tsuburaya. It wasn't officially a Tsuburaya co-production, but the people who worked on it had worked in Tsuburaya. So this is a movie about a giant turtle that's in Bermuda, and again, lots of riffs on Jaws themes. This is a movie that takes place on the 4th of July, much like Jaws does. They have a line about how they need to get a bigger boat, which is again a line from Jaws, and it's quite a wild trip. This is available on Blu-ray now from the Warner Archive if anybody wants to check it out. Yeah, that's Carl Weathers is the guy with the harpoon gun there. One thing that I did think that was fun about the Bermuda Depths in terms of it was playing a lot of stuff from Jaws, but then the end has this battle between a helicopter and the turtle, and Jaws 2 also has a battle between the shark and the helicopter, but Bermuda Depths actually came out before Jaws 2 by a few months, so I have to wonder, like, Did they know something, or is this just a happy coincidence? Another movie that has Japanese staff on it, this is Kazuo Sagawa did the effects on the Korean movie Crocodile Fans, which was then ported to, it was made as a co-production between Korea and Thailand, and then it was eventually re-released in the US as Crocodile. So this was a movie directed by the Korean director Won Se-lee, but then it was distributed by Chayo. So in the US release it says directed by Songpo Sands. So much like the Ultraman situation, this is perhaps Songpo Sands overreaching on some of his stuff. So that's something that you can see as a connection to the kaiju genre. But frankly, the miniature work in this is quite great. You have a crocodile rampaging through a small Thai village and really just wreaking havoc. Again, this is a little bit of a violent movie, so again, caution if you're watching it with small children. But I guess that is the spirit of Jaws. So many people were afraid to go into the water after seeing the original movie in 1975. There were a couple of other cases in Japan in the 1970s that didn't quite get made into film movies. There was a movie in Toei called Devil Manta. They wanted to make a movie about a manta kaiju. This fell through because they decided to pursue Message from Space instead, because Star Wars came out, and Star Wars was a huge hit as well. Toho also was working on a movie called Nessie for a while. It was a Hammer co-production, and that one also fell apart. We did a whole panel at G-Fest a few years ago about it if you want more details on Nessie, but it was basically a break on the Loch Ness Monster, which was again similar to what was going on in Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. And you might be wondering, why is there so much Loch Ness Monster kind of stuff? Well, there was an incident in 1977 with a fishing trawler that fished up a weird-looking creature. This is the Zuyo Maru incident. So the Zuyo Maru was the ship. It fished up this weird-looking thing, and it really caught people's imagination. And all the tests afterwards revealed that it was actually a basking shark. But that doesn't matter, because everybody kept thinking, well, this is clearly a plesiosaur. And as a result, in Godzilla movies, you can see this is called out in the opening to Godzilla 2014 at the bottom there. In Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, it's brought up again in the Bermuda depths, and in the Shiraku the Three-Eyed One. So it's a recurring thing for cryptozoologists to go back to over and over again. And it's a fun idea that there's a plesiosaur lurking in the ocean. So of course that's what a lot of the kaiju genre kind of like to go back to. But again, all caused because of a shark. There are a couple of other cases that are less obvious, that they're not necessarily giant water monsters, but there is a little bit of crossover with Jaws and the success of Jaws. So there's a Metal Heroes series of superhero shows that was quite popular in the 1980s in Japan. And two of them, one of them was named Spielbahn, was named after the director, Steven Spielberg. And then another one was named Scheider, which was named after the actor, Roy Scheider. So these are two big figures in Jaws that are then being honored as superheroes. The movie House, which is a crazy ghost movie about a bunch of schoolgirls who are eaten by a house, was basically greenlit on the back of, well, Jaws was a big success, we need to do a horror movie and give it to a young, up-and-coming director. And the director of House went on to direct tons and tons of really successful and influential movies in Japan. And then also the 1976 King Kong. While it was already in pre-production when Jaws came out, a lot of the marketing about it was focused on Jaws. And Dino De Laurentiis, the producer of King Kong 76, was not too shy about going around saying, oh, when Jaws died, nobody was crying. When King Kong is dying, everybody's gonna cry. So he was really trying to compare the two. He really wanted King Kong 76 to be bigger than Jaws. And being that these were two close movies that were relatively popular, of course, we saw some crossovers, although not quite as we were expecting here. In Korea in 1976, we got a mockbuster of King Kong called APE, which is short for Attacking Primate Monster. Don't think about that too hard. Yeah, you can see even under APE, there's very small text that says not to be confused with, and then there's big text King Kong. So it's great exploitation. But the posters, both for the Korean version and for the US version, they make a big deal about in this, the giant ape is going to fight a giant shark. And sure enough, in the movie, the ape fights a shark, and it's just a guy in the ape suit wrestling with a dead shark that they must have got from the fish market or something. And it is one of the funniest monster battles that you will ever see in a screen. So that's kind of, you know, one version of comedy. And then another version of comedy from the same year is the spoof from the UK, Queen Kong. So there's a throwaway gag in Queen Kong. Queen Kong is basically a gender-flipped version of King Kong. So, you know, instead of Faye Ray, it's Ray Faye that gets kidnapped by the Queen Kong. Yeah, sure enough, in this movie there's a little throwaway gag where they have Lady Jaws, which is just Jaws with lip sync that comes up. This movie actually did get ported to Japan, and it got a completely new comedy gag dub version for Japan. So I'd be curious to see like if somebody does a fan sub. It's kind of like a reverse What's Up Tiger Lily scenario where Japan is taking an English language movie and redubbing it as a comedy. Which, I mean, this is already a comedy, but they went extra. So this is kind of the classic era, but nowadays there are a lot of shark movies all over the place. This is just like a little a campaign sticker that I saw that's like, here are the shark movies that are coming out in the summer of 2023. Like, this is like half a dozen movies down at the bottom. What's going on? Well, for a while after the big glut of stuff with Jaws, there was kind of a silence on the cinematic shark side. You know, the biggest movie I think was probably Deep Blue Sea, which did get a little bit of a blockbuster in Japan. And then there was a Kindaichi Case Files movie that came out. It was called Murder in the Deep Blue Sea, and also features a shark in one of the scenes. So I don't know if that was intentional, if they decided to maybe retitle it something that would be exploitative of it. This movie is also fun because it's set in Okinawa, which makes sense with all of the sharks swimming around, but the villain in it was called King Caesar. So they're always talking about what could King Caesar be up to, which is a, you know, nod to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. So it all comes around, it's all tied together. You know, so this is the 90s. It was kind of the doldrums years for shark movies, but then in the 2000s, things started to really pick up. And this is thanks to the Sci-Fi Channel. The Sci-Fi Channel wanted to get into a lot more original content, not just showing reruns of old shows that had aired on other networks. And part of that was a push for original movies. So they make a whole lot of creature features, including, you know, a handful of shark titles over the years. You know, they had Hammerhead, Sharks of Venice, and Shark Swarm, and blah blah blah. One of the things that got very popular at Sci-Fi was to have versus movies. So they'd have a movie like Boa versus Python or Komodo versus Cobra. And because of that, there was kind of a push for similar kinds of movies. And one of these winds up being this movie called Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. And this movie has a crazy trailer because it features a plane flying through the sky and a giant shark jumps up, you know, thousands of feet into the air to grab this plane and eat it. It became a viral hit, and this trailer got more views than the trailer for Avatar. So it just really signals like, hey, this is going to be a thing. And this movie really took off. It became the first theatrical release for this studio, The Asylum, that was making very low-budget movies. You know, they kind of had a contract that was something like Sci-Fi would throw them a couple $1 million and they'd turn around 20 movies for them by the end of the year. So they really cranked stuff out over there. But there was a huge rush for more Mega Shark and more similar content. So they started a whole bunch of new franchises off of the back of that. So we got things like, you know, Two-Headed Shark Attack, which had a sequel, Three-Headed Shark Attack, Five-Headed Shark Attack, etc., etc. We got Planet of the Dawn series, and then other studios, Roger Corman, the great exploitation master himself, who would produce Piranha back in the 70s, he comes on and is like, okay, we're going to do a series called Sharktopus. And then things really come to a head with Sharknado in 2013, which is just like a completely goofy premise that there's a tornado full of sharks. And I guess it was a slow news week or something because everybody was talking about that movie, and it just became a really huge cultural phenomenon. And the Sci-Fi Channel was like, okay, we're going to have Sharknado week, where we just have a whole lot of new shark movies and show a whole bunch, and that's going to be our kind of one of our staples at this point. So we're talking about Mega Shark, and this is a franchise that I find just increasingly interesting as it goes along, because it gets increasingly kaiju-centric and Japanese with each subsequent sequel. The first is Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. This title was actually first commissioned by a Japanese company, U-Select. They were like, hey, we really want to have something new to put out on home video. If you like those versus movies that you're doing, do something like that, except make them giant. And that's exactly how Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus came about. And it was such a success that they followed up with Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus. And then we start to really feel the Kaiju influence with Mega Shark versus Mecha Shark. So if you were a fan of Godzilla, you're like, oh, I see what you're doing. And then if you watch the movie, they have lots of little call-outs here and there. We're like, oh, fire the oxygen destroyer missiles and blah, 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 blah. So they like to have little Easter eggs to Godzilla and other stuff like that. And then it gets increasingly ridiculous in 2015 with Mega Shark versus Colossus. And the Japanese title for this is Mega Shark versus Great Titan. So if you were following anime and kaiju stuff that was going on in 2015, this is the year that Shinji Higuchi was releasing his movie version of Attack on Titan. So they were really going whole hog into the let's cater to the Japanese market and do these kind of mockbusters and things that people in the kaiju fandom might really gravitate to. They announced a fifth movie, Mega Shark versus Moby Dick, but alas, it hasn't ever materialized. I hope they come back to these at some point. Now, that's Mega Shark, so that's one half of the big franchises, but, as we said before, Sharknado, that's their real cash cow. That's the one that you can buy like a Funko Pop figure of. And there's an interesting connection on that front also, because there's kind of a direct path that you can trace of the Tasmanian Devil from Looney Tunes was reimagined in Ultraman Great or Ultraman Towards the Future as the Gunja, which is this Tasmanian devil monster that lives inside of a tornado. Then in Godzilla the series in 1998, you have a monster called the Shrewster, which is a giant shrew that lives inside a tornado. In Godzilla the series, the main character, Nick Totopoulos, is played by Ian Ziering. Ian Ziering is the main actor in the Sharknado franchise. So there's a direct through line between from the Tasmanian Devil all the way to Sharknado. A fun aspect of all of these shark movies that were coming out in the 2000s is that in Japan, a lot of them were renamed to be kind of Jaws mockbusters, because Jaws is not trademarked in the same way in Japan as it is in the States. So you get these really great kind of renames. And I found a whole bunch of them. There's actually more than I could fit onto this table here. But a couple that I wanted to call out because I think they're extra amusing. The movie Atomic Shark was released in Japan as Shin Jaws. Nightmare Shark was released in Japan as Jaws, King of the Monsters. And then Horror Shark was released in Japan as Jaws the Monster, because the movie The Meg was released in Japan as Meg the Monster. So there's some great crossover there. But as long as we're talking about The Meg, this is a recent franchise. I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with it. It's about a giant megalodon that gets kicked in the face by Jason Statham. So it's a win-win. This is based on a series of novels from 1997, kind of going onward, by Steve Alton, and they really were attempting to make adaptations of it multiple times since the 90s. Multiple people have been attached, including Jan de Bont, who was attached to the 1994 failed version of Godzilla that eventually turned into the 1998 movie, and Guillermo del Toro, who was the director of Pacific Rim. So it has a great pedigree here, and eventually it was made into a movie in 2018, and then 2023 it got a sequel, and a lot of people were kind of confused seeing these movies in the theater in the US because there's a lot of Chinese actors in it, and there's a lot of Chinese dialogue, and this is because these are US-Chinese co-productions. So it's really made largely for the Chinese market, but it still gets released in the States, and they get a big actor like Jason Statham in to kind of really sell it for that international appeal. And I think this is also interesting because in the original novels, there's a bunch of Japanese characters who all get replaced by Chinese characters for the movie version. And that makes a lot of sense when it's a Chinese production, that they're like, hey, we don't want to see so many Japanese people in this, we want to see Chinese people in it, so they kind of swap them out. But this was a big hit in China, and subsequently we've seen a whole lot of Chinese giant shark movies coming out. So here's a list of 7 of them that have manifested basically since 2019. So there's been just a real rush of them in the last few years. Including a remake of Roger Corman's Sharkpuss. These all go directly to streaming services in China, but a few of them have gotten direct-to-DVD releases in the US. If you're going to watch one of them, I'd say Snow Monster versus Ice Shark. It actually has some practical special effects in it, which I was shocked by in the 2010s. So just going through a couple more different kaiju-related shark monsters in the video game Colossal Kaiju Combat. We had a couple of them. This was kind of a crowd-funded effort, so a lot of people would submit their own shark-related monster designs. And the one that I think really took off was Giga Shark because he was featured in one of the games that got released, and is kind of the most well-known of the shark-based monsters in Colossal Kaiju Combat. And then we also had Sword Shark and Megalowat. But I think Sword Shark is interesting because it's got a very, again, kind of gauntlet-ish type of design, much like Zebra, and also much like Knifehead from Pacific Rim. So Knifehead was, people say, oh, this is based on Viron from the Gamera movies, and to some extent he is, but he's also based on the design of a goblin shark. So this is the first monster that destroys the original Danger in Pacific Rim. But what I also think is great is they had this promotional suit that they toured around in Japan for the movie that they called Knifehead Kun. So it's just a very cute version that was posted in the cast and stuff. Speaking of gaming stuff, there have been a couple of board games that have shark monsters in them. You had Kaiju on the Earth in 2019, and then King of Tokyo has a spin-off called King of New York that has a shark monster named Mega Shark, so that's a little confusing with the Asylum franchise, but as long as you know which one is which. And then also this year, we have a new movie from SRS that is playing at G-Fest this weekend called Kaiju Glam Metal Shark Attack. The shark monster doesn't quite look the same as the one on the poster if you look at the trailer, but that's SRS cinema for you, so you kind of know what you're going to get. Now, on the Japanese side of things, we've had a lot of shark movies taking off in the past recent years as well. One of the first ones was Psycho Shark, or as it was titled in Japan, Jaws in Japan. It's really original. This is a movie that promises some shark action, but honestly, like 98% of the movie is just the main 2 female characters in bathing suits having, human drama, and then you have a shark CGI creature that comes out at the very end. This is not a good movie. I don't necessarily recommend it, but know that it's out there. One that's a bit more of a cult classic is Gyo from Junji Ito, and it's a gross movie, so like don't watch it on a full stomach. But this is a movie where fish and other aquatic life comes onto land, and they've been modified with kind of external limbs and stuff to attack people. It's a horror film, and it is the origin of the term gashonk. Gashonk is the sound effect of a shark kicking down a door, in case you ever needed that. In 2016, there was a movie called Higanjima Deluxe. It was a sequel to the Higanjima TV series, and it has a big shark monster. This is about an island full of vampires and people struggling to get out, but it does have a lot of cool creatures in it. And this kind of reminds me of like the Street Sharksploitation. I don't know if anybody remembers those from the 90s, but it's a cool design. Also in 2016, we got Shin Godzilla. Kamada-kun, the second form of Shin Godzilla, was inspired by a frilled shark. So that's kind of the build-up, and then things really start taking off in 2018 in Japan. You get something called the Japan Shark Movie Society, and these are a bunch of maniacs who are really obsessed with shark movies, and they want to catalog them. They start a fanzine where they are putting out reviews of different shark movies from around the world. They start up a stage play called Monk vs. Shark. And they are really just heavily involved, and in fact, they do the Japanese translations for a lot of the shark movies from the US, including most of SRS's releases. They kind of work together to co-sponsor something called the Tokyo International Shark Film Festival, which is being held right now, I believe. This is something that has talks with different people, trivia, there's a famous comedian that's involved, and they have their own board game. The board game, the Samabali, so Same is the Japanese word for shark, got a short directed by Minoru Kawasaki, so the guy that directed Monster X Strikes Back. I guess he must have gotten the bug from doing that shark short, because he then turned around and also made a movie called Game of Shark. And this is described as, quote, the Japanese answer to everything and everywhere all at once. And I don't know what that means. I'm guessing it is ridiculous because this is Minoru Kawasaki, and he is ridiculous like that. So the Japan Shark Movie Society is involved in a lot of stuff. They also go to Wonder Festivals. So, if you're one of those people that like to collect figures, they make figures of movie sharks. So you have a bunch like Sharkenstein, Cocaine Shark, Sharkula, these like Sci-Fi Channel kind of movies. They make figures, they model kits of, and they're selling them at Wonderfest, as well as the Love Shark. And you might be saying, wait, what is the Love Shark? And that is from, there's this series of movies directed by Taichiro Natsume. The first one is available in the US from SRS, under the title Well Shark, which is about kind of a cursed shark that is in a well, and then it starts haunting people, showing up in their bathtubs and toilets and things like that. This was renamed as Great Shark for the DVD release in the States, because you got to make it the maximum exploitation so people know exactly what they're getting. This is a goofy concept, but Natsume, I guess, really got his money's worth out of this shark costume, because the next project he had was Love Shark, which is about a woman who is marrying a shark and has a disappointing father figure. I'm really curious to see this. And he is since following that up with a movie he's filming right now called The Last Shark, which I guess also has a man-eating crocodile as a character, and so the universe of these is really expanding. And then lastly, that's included on the Well Shark release is Shark of the Dead, which is just kind of a short about people on the highway getting assaulted by this goofy-looking shark. So all of these are part of the same series, but this guy is shark crazy. You can see in his profile picture, he's holding a shark. Also in 2023, we got a movie on Netflix called Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. This is a zombie movie, but it has a great sequence at the end. They go to an aquarium because the guy wants a diver suit. He figures the diver suit will protect him from zombie bites. He finds at the aquarium, the shark at the tank has eaten a bunch of zombies who have fallen into the shark tank. The zombies' legs come out from the bottom of the shark, and then you have a shark walking around on zombie legs. It's a zombie shark piloted by zombies that is chasing them around the aquarium. It's fantastic. So, would recommend checking this out on Netflix. We also got a movie called Ninja vs. Shark. This is directed by Koichi Sakamoto, the same guy that directed Ultra Galaxy and Mega Monster Battle. This got a US release quite recently. It's a goofy very exploitative Japanese splatter film. It's very, very, very rated R, so be aware of that when you are checking it out. But it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's ninja versus shark. There's a ninja that controls sharks and sends his sharks out against these ninjas. On the more kind of kaiju side of things, there's a movie that came out in Japan recently with produced in cooperation with the Japan Shark Movie Society called Hot Spring Shark Attack. I'm really hoping this one comes to the States soon because it has a sequence with a giant shark swimming through the city. And I guess it features a shark in onsen and public baths based on the art, but I didn't see that Shinji Higuchi seemed to like it, so that's something. There's a manga that's coming out soon called Killer Shark in Another World. This is a great concept because it's isekai. Isekai are very popular about people getting transported to fantasy worlds. This is a huge genre in manga right now, but this is specifically made by a shark fan. The premise is this character has a avatar that's a shark. It has the powers of different movie sharks. So, the shark can have 3 heads as a nod to three-headed shark attack, or grow huge as like a Meg, or there's a mega shark in this. There's a Sharknado. So it's a bunch of things that you have seen in these kind of sci-fi channel movies. There's all sorts of nods, like even recreating the posters for these films as the covers for different chapters. The movie, the TV series Marginal Service also has a Jaws episode. This is great because the crew is being attacked by a giant shark yokai, and their solution to it is to take the cute animal mascot character and put a gas tank on him and try to shove it into the shark's mouth. So they're disrespecting the cute animal mascot, and it's comedy ensues. And then speaking of anime, we also got a collaboration with the recent Gamma Rebirth series with Orekake Kozame, which is a series about a cute little baby shark that's quite popular in Japan. So it had a collaboration with Gamera where cute Gamera hangs out with the cute baby shark because Gamera has no self-respect, and Godzilla isn't about to be cute and hang out with these baby. Oh wait. So yeah, there's also a collaboration with Orekake Kozame for Godzilla, and it's quite adorable. And they both have these really plush costumes going around to different publicity appearances. So we are close to wrapping up time. So let's quickly just roll through. There's a bunch of shark-based monsters in the Ultraman franchise, including ones that you don't necessarily think about. If you look at this design of the evil Ultraman Belial, he has a very shark-shaped kind of silhouette. In Super Sentai, there are a whole lot of different shark-based characters that have shown up over the years, including one that was only in Power Rangers that wasn't from the Super Sentai, which I was surprised to find out about that one. That's the Hammerhead one at the end there. The Kamen Rider franchise, of course, has had many monsters of the week that are shark-based ever since the original series in 1971. This is something that comes up quite often. And there have even been several shark-based heroes, hero characters that have a shark-based motif, including Grand Caesar in Power Rangers and Caesar X and Super Sentai, Kamen Rider. They've all kind of had different iterations on this because they have a whole bunch of animals. They have animal themes for some of the series. A shark is a common animal that they would necessarily throw in because it's something that's quite intimidating. We also get a whole bunch of kind of shark-based humanoid characters in anime and manga. So, if you see the recent One Piece series on Netflix, the live-action one, you have Arlong at the bottom there. You have, a shark-based guy in Naruto, and Blue Over the Wall, and Blue Sub 6. The one from Yokai Watch, in the middle holding the watch there, that character's name is Steve Jaws. And then we've also got Killer Shark from the DC Comics. It's part of the Suicide Squad anime that's coming out right now on Hulu, so that's a fun watch. But we could go on and on and on because there are so many different cases of movie shark monsters and pastiches in Japanese culture, but I think we're about at time. So on that note, everybody, thanks for showing up, and happy Sharksploitation.